about the, you'll be the one to use your,
Do I have to use the microphone? I mean, I have a loud voice.
yeah, but
Okay, so that's she. Oh yeah, okay.
your PPT, I'll work on
Alright.
that. I'll be the one to work.
So my my CES colleagues are very supportive.
Yeah.
Okay, magandang umaga sa lahat. In English, good morning everyone. In Mindanao State University, usually, when we give our greetings, we always say, greetings of peace. It's something that is profound if you're coming from Mindanao, because it means one thing, that you have endured violence, or that you have endured suffering. So that is why this morning, I'm going to present something that's not conventional in terms of talking about peace building. Because usually, when we talk about peace and peace building, what is in mind is a religious concept of peace building, which is very positive, very spiritual. That peace is something that's good in itself. But I'm going to speak this morning, grounding peace on something that is based on the suffering approach. That's based on the wounds as an effect to violence. Because talking about peace, there's something ethical. Peace building carries this heavy and profound ethical weight. The title of my work, which is actually a work in progress, this has something to do with the dissertation that I'm going to propose in the University of San Carlos, hopefully this semester. I'm actually in the process of writing this one for my second PhD, and that's philosophy. That's actually my original discipline, though I'm teaching 3 disciplines: language studies, peace studies, and of course, philosophical studies. And the ethical foundation of peace building requires twofold conception of suffering and the healing force of narrative hospitality. Next slide, please. All right, so the picture. We keep on talking about peace. We keep on theorizing about peace. When we are asked about peace, we always have something to say about peace. But have you really done peace building? Have you really built peace in this world, in your community, and even in yourself? So that's a very challenging question. You know what? I am a survivor of the 2017 Paris siege. Of course, I cannot reveal to you what happened during the time, although unfolding my story is an example of narrative hospitality. But I would like to thank God for I have survived, including my son at the time, because at home the time, there are only me and my son. And it was very horrible. Now, surprisingly, after 6 years, the Mindanao State University main campus was bombed by terrorists. 4 of MSU constituents, including 1 from the Mindanao State University, IIT, right, Sir Megs, was killed during that. So people were asking, what happened? Mindanao State University offered peace education as an effect to the Marawi siege, yet after 6 years, it was banned. And that is the reason why I would like to ground my ethical framework on peace building, or of peace building on suffering approach, because the two-fold conception of suffering, because when we speak of suffering, we are conscious of the suffering of the victims, but we're not conscious of the suffering of the terrorists or the perpetrators. Okay? There was once when I was invited, because that's what I've said, I am one of the trailblazers of the peace education. We were the ones crafted our peace education curriculum. So, as part of the Healing Center of the Mindanao State University, I was actually invited to build peace along with the suspected terrorists of the bombing. I was very excited at the time, but my husband is actually a military officer, refused that I should be involved in that particular healing. Now, the picture, the tagay, you see that? So, from becoming a survivor or a victim of the Marawi siege to a peace builder. So you see the beauty when you experience suffering, when you experience violence, because you really can get something from it. Okay, next thing. So what are my goals as a presenter? One, to elucidate narratives of violence experienced by overseas Filipina domestic workers while unfolding the strength and perseverance embedded within their stories. Not within the victims or the survivors, but within the stories of the survivors. Second, to employ recourse conceptions of suffering and hospitality as lenses to explore the ethical foundations of peace building. Actually, the dissertation that I'm going to propose has this fundamental claim. My claim is that the fundamental path to conflict peace building is existential and ethical. That's the claim that I'm going to defend, but it's a working in progress. Third, to propose that in recourse philosophy, there is a third dimension of suffering. This is implied, and it's something that I'm going to investigate. Because what's clear in recourse philosophy is that there are two modes of suffering, but again, the third is implied, and that implied third dimension of suffering is the thing that I'm going to explore further. The healing of wounded narratives, which opens possibilities for the restoration of dignity among women who have endured violence and for the remembrance of those who have rested in perpetual peace. Next slide, please. All right. There are multiple conceptions of peace, and even peace building. But I found out that peace building is a figure of speech. It's basically metaphorical and even analogical. I have read a lot of books about peace building, but these thoughts of Heidegger, Galton, I know that Professor Tanabe is an expert on liberal peace building. The association of peace building to democracy, to autonomy, right? All right. So, Heidegger, Galton, Ricoeur, of course, that's my theoretical framework, Lederach, and of course, most popular, the UN definition of peace building. Look at that. But where danger is, grows the saving power. So that's quite metaphorical. That peace building is associated with danger, and it's also associated with an energy that would save suffering. And we have Johann Galton, conflicts are not a game to be won or lost, but are often a struggle. And Ricoeur, I love this, the past, according to Ricoeur, there is no such I without a past. We always have a past. Therefore, we are a wounded I. That's our past. We need to recognize that one. If our recognition would say that, no, I have a perfect life, I am happy, my husband is pogi, my friend Ryan is pogi. Forgetting the negative experiences in our life, I don't think you will grow, and I don't think you can effectively build peace. Bringing which have not been kept, it is a matter of bringing them back to life like the dry bones in the valley described in the prophecy of Ezekiel. This is the work of peace building, to renew life, to let life be back. That's the work of conflict transformation. By the way, in short, let me differentiate to you peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. Right? Because when we say peacemaking, it doesn't mean peacekeeping, it doesn't mean peace building. Now, let me bring to you what happened during the Marawi siege. When we were attacked by the Mautic group, local terrorists, and then during the attack, there were the presence of the military, that's peacekeeping. And that's very temporary. Violence still there. All right. When, after several days, the traditional leaders of Marawi offered their help to negotiate between the terrorists and the government, that is peacemaking. So there's the presence of a third party because there must be negotiation and mediation. But if you make one accountable, if there's a sense of justice, recognition of there is endurance of suffering, which implies the healing of wounds, that is peace building. There is transformation. You're actually using conflict as a tool to transformation. You're recognizing suffering as a venue for peace. That is peace building. Okay? All right? Okay. So these are the terms that I'm going to highlight for my discussion. Women, I am a woman. You're a woman. You're a woman. So 3 of us are women. But I understand that these men love women. So still, you are part of the discussion. Stereotypes, suffering, hospitality. Next slide, please. All right. These are names of women. I have read reports, one by one. And of course, starting from 1991, Apple, Irma, so names of women. And these women were actually Filipino women working as domestic workers. Some did not endure suffering because they died. Only few have endured suffering. And these are actually titles of news reports about how the Filipina as domestic helpers were maltreated. So, the image of violence is really here. Look, dead body of Filipina found inside freezer in Kuwait, identified. And one woman fell from the window because she was actually pushed by her employer. And it was said that it was basically a form of suicide. Although it was not. Our Filipina domestic helpers who were given leftovers for their food. Next slide, please. Okay, I have your statistics. Cases of abuses suffered by OFWs as reported in 2020 have reached 4,000 in the Middle East, 539 in Asia, and 86 in Europe and America. And the majority are actually women. Among the total number of OFWs who work abroad from April to September 2023, 1.20 million of 55.6% were actually women. I know Dr. Ryan Mabolok has been talking about structural injustice. I've been talking about poverty. By the way, the recent book of Dr. Mabolok, The Politics of Peace, it's really a must read. If you're working on peace, if you're working on violence, anything that's relevant to peace building. I'm actually using that for my theoretical framework, and I hope that Dr. Tanabe will give me a book or books authored by him so that they could be included in my theoretical background, right? True? Okay, thank you in advance. Every year, 172,000 Filipino women left their country to work abroad. And research conducted by International Labor Organization Asia Pacific found that in 2020, 75% of cases of abuse received by the overseas OWA involved female overseas migrant workers. When I researched on this, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I found out that there must be something behind this. The physical reasons are there. No money, pressure from the family. The Philippines is a poor country. You are a woman, you have not finished your education, so why not try your fate abroad? Of course, it's a philosophical conference. So I was also looking for something philosophical. Stereotypes. Stereotypes are a culprit of violence. Let it up. Identify stereotypes as a fuel to violence. Galton also. Every time I teach peace education in the classroom, I always emphasize gender violence, specifically against women and the gay people. Because if you're using the language of record, these communities are vulnerable. They are fragile. And they need our responsibility. Remember, Dr. Mabakyao, one of my idols in philosophy, aside of course from Dr. Ryan, Dr. Roger, who is actually promoting indigenous philosophy, together with Mix, my friends. Anong sinabi ni Dr. Mabakyao? Sabi niya, I think he quoted Jeremy Bentham, if I am right, that whenever there is suffering, there is a call for moral consideration. That's my point. Okay, next slide please, Tatagay.
Katagay.
Okay? Katagay, meaning kainuman. I mean,
Katagay.
that's basically a hospitable trait of the Filipino people. Right? And that's also an ethical element of peace building. Because Filipinos, when we have problems, we do not go inside a room to think of our problems. But usually, we go outside, get a microphone, sing a song, video, okay? Or we go to the seashore and drink tuba, right? I mean, I don't know if Japanese people are also doing the same. But we Filipinos are doing that way. Am I right?
Yeah.
Or, you see?
Yes.
Thank you for agreeing with me. Okay, so, according to record, oneself as another, destruction by someone else of a subject's capacity to act. That's violence. I've heard Dr. Mabulok mention about our capacity as a moral human being. Our obligation, which means our response to somebody who is suffering, right? But what I like with the core is emphasis on the capacity to suffer. Because for Record, I act, therefore I suffer. Okay? Now, most of the evil in the world comes from violence among human beings. We have the capacity to do harm.
Yes.
We're always being told by our teachers in the classroom, by Professor Mabulok and Professor Tanabe, don't do harm, particularly Buddhism. Am I right, Professor Tanabe? I'm also reviewing Buddhism, particularly the concept of suffering. Okay. Using the other as an instrument is the beginning of violence. Violence compels us to give morality the character of obligation. That's Levinas.
Yes.
When we see other who is suffering, that other is a summon that I must respond to.
Yes.
And that's what peace building is all about. Okay. All right. So this is the suspect. Among other suspects. Stereotypes. Stereotypes for me are actually thoughtless thoughts. There are two types. You have the negative stereotype. You also have the positive stereotype. Don't have to discuss that one further. Stereotypes are fixed and oversimplified, usually distorted image that we often rely on. That's the problem. We rely on it, right? If we see a Muslim, what we think of a Muslim is that the Muslim is a terrorist. When we see a woman, what we think of her is a sexual object. When we see a Filipina, what we think of a Filipina is an inferior race. These are all negative stereotypes. And as a woman, my advocacy is actually not necessarily to fight stereotypes, because stereotypes, they are built-in mechanism of reasoning, of our arguments as rational, yet, because according to Heidegger, thoughtless individuals are actually human beings. And human beings as professional beings. Look, North Korea, for example, takes too much pride in its advanced nuclear weapons. But the real trick of these weapons is not in winning in time of war, but in losing humanity. The best friend of Ryan, Richard Hidarian. What did he say about Mindanao? That Mindanao is a sub-Saharan region of the country. Which is a hasty generalization. Which is definitely not true. And it hurt us, Mindanao people. In fact, it's also a negative stereotype when one thinks of Mindanao as a land of conflict, as a land of war. Because Mindanao, on the other hand, is the land of peace. Okay, next slide please. So these are stereotypes. Women are sexual objects. Women cannot make wise decisions. And of course, one of our favorite movies, I believe, the mother of Rose, when she pushed Rose to marry that wealthy individual. So Rose said, "No, mom. Please, no." Pero anong sinabi ng mother niya? Of course, it's unfair. Because Rose said, that's unfair. He's not the man I would like to marry. I don't love him. But according to the mother of Rose, of course it's unfair. We're women. Our choices are never easy. And of course, the derogatory term for Filipino woman working in Japan. That we are a Japa. I mean, Japa Yuki is a nice term because it says that you are a Filipina working in Japan. That is the denotative meaning of Japa Yuki. But it connotes something, and that something is prostitution. And even hostility. That domestic helpers are slaves, and that Bisaya are beats. I know that, who are people from Luzon? Okay. I mean, this is for all of us, right? We understand, we see how soap operas, how movies are portraying helpers of rich people in the metro as the Bisaya or the people from Mindanao in particular.
Yes. 10 minutes to
Okay.
wrap up, Dr. Eva.
Alright. 10 minutes, that's quite long. I think how many, Katake, how many, I feel like a plenary speaker, I'm sorry. Alright, no, there is something that I would like to share because I love this one. Huh? I've researched this, that one. When we speak of a Filipino beauty, my beauty, look at my beauty. It is associated with exotic beauty. So American people, the West in particular, would like to marry a Filipina because the beauty of a Filipina is exotic. And when you think of exotic, it has something to do with animals. Yes, ugly, very good, 100%. So it's actually a misrepresentation of the Filipinas when this misrepresentation is not neutralized, and that would actually lead to violence. Right? Next slide, please, Katagay. So, this is the twofold conception of suffering, which for Ricor, suffering is the wound and the terror of history. So, first, an endured suffering. That's the first appearance of suffering. The capable human is the victim of violence. Endured. We're talking about resilience here. But Paul Ricoeur is not actually using the word resilience, but he's using the word endurance. Endure the suffering, because it's only when you endured suffering that you learn something from your suffering. And the second appearance of suffering, the inflicted suffering. The agent of action is capable of harm. So in this case, suffering is an ability. To suffer means to endure. So I suffer. Please look at that. For the endured suffering, the victim is wounded. I am wounded. And for the second appearance of suffering, inflicted suffering, I am wounded. So both are wounded. The relationship is wounded. Therefore, what we can offer is the healing of this one. Because we really cannot transform from one suffering to another bliss if we will not recognize our wounds, if we will not heal our. Next slide, please. Kaya hapit na video. Okay. So those are the moments of suffering. First is the suffering within the victim and the perpetrator, interpersonal, relational type, and the incapacity. Yes, this one. You know what? There is this manifestation or indication that a person is suffering. And you know what is that? When you cannot tell your story, it means that you are suffering. Although I believe in the Chinese principle in terms of telling a story that not everyone deserves to know the truth, or not everyone deserves to hear my story. But if you cannot tell your story and you don't know the reason why, it means to say that you are suffering. Suffering teaches, this is the hermeneutic dimension of suffering. Suffering demands for me. Okay, next slide please. Bright naman mo ang hermeneutic. So, diba, remember my third goal? I think for 5 minutes, right? So, healing of suffering, of wounded memories and narratives through narrative hospitality. Diba, I've told you that the superficial definition of hospitality is that a demonstration of a welcoming attitude to our guest and to a stranger. But based on my readings, the word hospitality actually carries a heavy ethical implication. You read Kant, cosmopolitanism, our duty towards a stranger. Levinas, yes, the appearance of the other means something to us. Okay, of course, Ricoeur and other people in the world. Okay, so ethics of linguistic hospitality calls for further step that of taking responsibility in imagination. Because when we tell our story, what? We recall the past. We weave the story. And that's something that's creative. Imagination is a human capacity. It's our artistic side. Eh di man ta pwede magpataka-taka og storya. Diba? So, naintindihan ninyo? Okay, good. And in sympathy. Because we are willing to listen to the story of others. Because the story of others might be my story through the life narratives which concern that other. My point, although not simple, but I wanted to clear this one, that my point is actually not healing the physical wound, but healing the wounded narrative. When we say that women are weak, when we say that women are objects of sex, that's a wounded narrative. And we want to heal that one. Because these are narratives that keep on lingering, and they sometimes are basis of our judgment and even on how we respond to the woman. Alright, ending na ba ni? Peace? Okay. Ayaw sa? Katagay? Alright. So peace through narrative sharing and mutual exchange of memories is a form of dialogue that welcomes reconciliation. Di ba anong sabi ni Dr. Mabolo? Dapat open tayo. Dapat makipag-dialogue tayo. Okay? Openness to the other. Alright, last slide please. That we empty our minds of stereotypes is impossible. Only when we are willing to connect with others do we begin to be open to modifying our preconceptions. Also, given that we do not dominate or control the connection between and among ourselves, there is hope to grow in each other's thinking. This is the ethics of peace building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will proceed to our next speaker. With the title of his paper, Against the Shipwreck of Thought and the Speed of Knowing. Learning in Artificial Intelligence, Virilius, Technological Philosophy, Independent Pedagogy, and Ethics of Attention. Let us welcome Mark Justin Santos from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Let's have a round of applause. A round of applause. Nakalimot ko palakpak siya.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Justin. I'm an undergrad student in philosophy at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Also, I would like to first thank the people who made this possible. My organization, Humanist Alliance Philippines International, which is also an affiliate of Humanists International. We are a community of secular humanist thinkers. The founder, Ms. Marisa Torres Langset, founded my way here in Japan, which is why I'm here. So yeah, just wanted to special mention her. Okay, next slide please.
Mark, is your mic on?
Hello?
Yes. Okay, so first, here's the outline of my research. So basically, I just wanted to share the arguments that I have made. We will further discuss that later on. But then, I wanted to show you that the first three parts correlates with the first premises of my argument. For premise 1 to 3, that is discussed in premise in parts 1, parts 2, and part 3, and then premise 4 to 5 is discussed with the tragedy of artificial intelligence, and then premises 6 to all the way to the conclusion is discussed on the succeeding parts. So it's structured in that way. So it's more of like I wanted you to see this as more of a logical argument, and where I'm setting the premises on each part of the discussion. So next slide, please. Okay, so first, let's begin with the context first. We often celebrate speed as the marker of technological progress. It's always viewed in a positive light. But then, Virilio, he warns throughout his work that speed has the capacity to risk the sacrifice of movement that is basically necessary to make things meaningful. It's part of what makes us human. It's what makes things authentic. But then, because of speed, all of those meanings are sacrificed. And according to Virilio, such technological advancements carries with it the potential for its own undoing. It names this as the integral accident. And we will view artificial intelligence, learning in artificial intelligence in that light, because it is so far the latest vessel of disappearance. It's quite prominent right now, and people are using it as a way to learn. So yeah, next slide please. So what is the integral accident? So first, Virilio, when defining his work, he didn't explicitly define it in the conventional way as a dictionary term, as you would encounter it in the ordinary sense, but rather he described it with examples. So if you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck. If you invent nuclear energy, you also invent the possibility for nuclear bombs. So this is basically, he basically borrowed the concept from Aristotle that the accidents reveal the true nature, the substance of a thing. Substance basically the thing that exists. It is what is in that thing, that not as a part, but it cannot exist separately from the thing. But then the accident is basically the unanticipated or the unexpected outcome of that thing, which is tied to that thing. And that's why it's called integral accident, because it is integral to the existence of that thing. Because if you invent a ship, you also invent the possibility for a shipwreck. You invent the plane, you also invent the possibility for a plane crash. Just as with knives. Knives are used to cut vegetables and whatsoever, but you could also use it to kill another human being. And what I'm going to do is to extend this to artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. Okay, another thing. For context, we cannot separate the integral accident with polar inertia because polar inertia it's more we have to understand that Virilio was more of a phenomenologist of speed. We wanted to examine what are the ideological implications of our perceptions of speed. Because in as a default, we see speed as a marker of technological progress. That the things that used to take like 5 minutes is now reduced to 1 minute, and we see that as more of the benefit of technology. But then we fail to see that sometimes, because of that, we are sacrificing something else. And well, polar inertia is something that Virilio did not explicitly define, but he dedicated an entire work just to discuss this. So first, we have to think of polar inertia as it's more of like the swimmer's treadmill, where the swimmers are flowing against a current, and then they have this illusion of movement, but they're staying in one place. They cannot move from that. Just like a hamster on the wheel. The hamster is running, but he has the illusion of movement, but he's going nowhere at all. And according to Virilio, that's exactly what's happening with modern day technologies. Like say for example, Formula One. The racetracks are now are like the starting line and the finish line are starting to merge because we favor speed. Video calls. We sacrifice what could have been a physical human interaction in favor of a digital presence. And this, next slide please. And according to Virilio, historically, there were two types of men, the nomad and the sedentary. The nomad is basically defined by his travel, by his journey, by the tales that he's going to tell when he arrives, the ability to make meaning from experience, where they are replaced by instant images from social media in the modern day. We are slowly losing those travelers' tales. Like I mean that from back then we used to travel with horses, with walking, but the next thing you know we have bullet trains. So this is exactly what's happening with artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. Okay, so first we have to view artificial intelligence from the lens of an integral accident. If you invent artificial intelligence, you also invent the accidents that follow. You also invent AI dependence, you also invent AI plagiarism, you also invent reduced cognition as an outcome of using artificial intelligence as a way to learn. So, and this is backed up by a lot of empirical studies which we will tackle later. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, since artificial intelligence is a piece of technology, then we could say that like every other piece of technology, it also embodies the polar inertia. How? Because artificial intelligence easily automates things. If you use it for learning, what could have been, let's say for philosophy, when we learn philosophical texts, when we read them, it's something that actually takes a lot of time. It takes days or even a few months whatsoever. But with artificial intelligence, if you use it for learning, you get instances. You get responses instantly, and then like what you sacrifice there is the journey of movement through difficulty, because learning is it's something that takes time. It's not something that you have like that. Knowledge is not something that you learn overnight, but rather it's something that takes time. It takes journey. It's a movement through difficulty. But then with artificial intelligence, with instant responses, you sacrifice that learning process, but at the same time you also sacrifice that learning quality. You're not moving at all because you're also hollowing the meaning that's tied to artificial intelligence. Like, next slide, please. Okay, so yes, so this is basically the empirical evidences that support the idea that artificial intelligence embodies polar inertia and AI dependency. Like if you examine the studies of Krasmina et al., right, those who use ChatGPT, they significantly had lower brain connection, language output, and long-term retention. Slower long-term retention. And then if you read Fan et al.'s research, that tools like ChatGPT, they can instill metacognitive laziness and whatsoever. All of those things. You cannot sacrifice. Sorry. You cannot basically learn instantly without sacrificing or hollowing the meaning of what you're learning. You cannot do that without sacrificing that, rather. Okay, so in order for us to resolve that polar inertia and the dependence, the AI dependence from the integral accidents of AI, then I argue that AI ethics, if it is to demarcate responsible use from irresponsible use to resolve the problems of AI that arises from the polar inertia and the integral accidents, it has to take what we call the negative horizon. Next slide, please. So the negative horizon is basically the term or the perception that we really use as more like the perception of the catastrophic effects of speed. Like, again, our obsession with speed is something that's ideological. It's not value neutral because we have the tendency to fail to see what it erases, like the disappearance of meaning, the evaporation of substance, and the abandonment of movement. And as the title of the book implies, Negative Horizon, it is an essay in dromoscopy. It is imperative for us to understand dromoscopy because speed, as we know it, it's something that like we always celebrate speed as a marker of progress, a marker of innovation, as a mastery of time, but we fail to see the negative consequences that arise when we sacrifice the journey, the duration that's required for learning. So next slide, please. So also another thing, the negative horizon is somehow extended by Virilio later on in his work, The Original Accident, because we use this term accidentology because there has been no science of accidents. Like we study technology for what it is, for its substance, but we don't necessarily perceive the accidents, the unexpected consequences that follow from its invention. So according to Virilio, we need to anticipate that. If we invent a ship, we also invent a shipwreck. But if we are to design ethics that's meant to resolve the problems that arise with AI, then we have to anticipate the shipwreck. We have to anticipate the integral accidents of AI, the AI dependence. Okay? And so that's basically just his point, and that's the same thing with polar inertia. If we also have to anticipate that the speed of AI has to sacrifice something in the process. Like, how do I put this? It's more of like an instant noodle. An instant noodle is not the same as a real ramen, right? Right? So
I'm hungry.
an instant coffee is not the same as brewing coffee in an actual pot, having the time to grind the beans and whatsoever. It's something that takes time. And if we sacrifice those journey, if we want things in an instant, then we will always sacrifice something in the process. We will sacrifice the quality. We sacrifice the quality of learning when we favor speed instead of the quality. Okay? Next slide, please. So, okay, wait, let me, okay, so as a response, first now that we have established that that artificial intelligence is an instance that embodies polar inertia and integral accidents, then and that we should cultivate an ethics that is catered to the negative that is catered to the polar inertia and the integral accidents. As a response to the polar inertia, then we must cultivate an ethics of attention. Okay, so what is basically an ethics of attention? This is borrowed from Simon Weil and Iris Murdoch. So I'm just going to look at one aspect, a few aspects of ethics of attention because it's quite broad as a concept. So there are many aspects in ethics of attention. The point is that attention itself is a moral act. Why? Because we commit moral failures by failing to turn our gaze into something, into someone rather. For example, we pass by a homeless man. The tendency for us is to not pay attention at all. Why? Because this man is living the kind of life that somehow I'm in a better state than this guy and I am not doing anything. So if we extend that to AI, I mean, a lot of us, a lot of the students that depend on AI for learning they basically sacrifice attention for that. So further, what I'm simply pointing out is this, that we don't need to create novel or new theories as to respond to the integral accidents of AI if we already have existing ones that which we can extend to resolve those problems. Okay, so I do think that an ethics of attention is could be the response to the integral accident of AI, since it is what we sacrifice when we favor speed. We don't pay attention to the actual material. So there are aspects of attention like truth seeking, waiting, and selfing. You're denying yourself when you favor learning the actual material rather than consulting or depending on ChatGPT for answers. Okay? And again, another aspect of attention is truth seeking. Like, we pay attention to something because there is something that needs to be known. Our attention is captivated by something that we do not know, something that we wanted to know. So, if we pay attention to it, if we want to know the truth, then depending on AI for learning is something that's not going to achieve that end. It's not going to achieve the end of truth, because you're not being charitable with the author of the material, the thinker that you're learning whatsoever. Okay, next slide, please.
5 minutes, sir. 5 minutes.
2 minutes. And okay, so 3 minutes. So yeah, this is basically my point. We have to extend the ethics of attention to AI as a response against the integral accident of dependence. But again, later on, I would also point out that AI dependence is not the only integral accident of AI. There are still others that there are still other accidents that are left for us to uncover later on. So, but rather, if we are going to take a negative horizon, then we must anticipate those accidents rather than reacting after the fact. Okay. So, okay. I also wanted to say that I do not mean to say that the use of AI is a moral wrong, but rather, and I also do not mean to say that AI should be banned, but rather, how it is utilized is what makes it problematic. Okay? And again, this framework of understanding AI within the lens of polar inertia and integral accidents, somehow it creates the framework or the groundwork for us to easily somehow give us a glimpse to demarcate or to separate what would constitute responsible use from irresponsible use. Okay, since the integral accident of AI is dependence, if I'm depending on AI, then this is irresponsible use. If I'm using AI in such a way that is not depending on it, I'm still being charitable to the material itself, then somehow we could say that we could argue that it consists of a responsible use. Next slide, please. Okay. This is also a response against the integral accidents of AI. So again, this is a response to both polar inertia and integral accidents. the ethics of attention is more of catered to respond or to resolve against the polar inertia of AI, which is basically we sacrifice learning by favoring speed. So right now, as a response to that AI kind of dependence for learning, we have to cultivate also an independent pedagogy. And with that, I turn to Jackson Chair and to Immanuel Kant for what would constitute an independent pedagogy. So according to Rancher, he had this. He basically challenged explication with this notion that that you need the master for you to be able to learn. That the purpose of a teacher is to explicate, to teach, and the student is basically just there to learn, to receive. But then, if Jackson Chair actually countered that idea. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me a bit more minutes. I got rattled by the time, so a few more minutes ago. So yeah, Jackson Chair actually countered that traditional method of explication through his example of Joseph Jacotot. So Joseph Jacotot was a prominent teacher at French, and basically he had these students that had the language barrier. It's like this. Let's assume that I only know Japanese, and then I have English students. So what Joseph Jacotot did was to give a translation of that particular text for the English students, for the foreign students. Even without teaching, the outcome was that these students performed better than those who actually learned using the language of their own. So it goes on to show that even without the presence of a teacher, even without the presence of a master, learning can still exist. Learning can still, occur. The learning process could occur. So, in that case, if we extend this, we could also borrow this. This kind of reasoning was also, I won't say borrowed, but rather it was already echoed in Kant's notion of the sapere aude found in What is Enlightenment, that the courage to use one's own reason without dependence on the other. Because we could learn, if we look at Socrates, he was philosophizing by asking questions. And we could extend the same kind of ethic with AI, with learning with AI. We could use our own reasoning without depending on the other. We could achieve knowledge even without using it or without depending on it. So, next slide please. Okay, so if we recap the argument, premise one, if technologies accelerate, they may lead to stagnation or polar inertia. Premise number two, if there are technological advancements, then it is highly probable that such technological advancements lead to integral accidents. Premise number three, artificial intelligence is an instance that embodies or that advances and accelerates. And by virtue of that, then artificial intelligence may lead to integral accidents and polar inertia. Then if premise 4 is the case, then AI ethics, a study that ensures safe and ethical development and deployment of AI, should be designed according to the accidents and the acceleration that AI came with. And premise number 6, problems concerning acceleration requires an ethics of attention or slowness. Premise number 7, one of the accidents of AI is dependent thinking. And premise number 8, a solution to this is to cultivate the practice of independent pedagogy. Premise number 9, if AI ethics is to be designed according to the accidents and acceleration incurred by AI, then it should consist of an ethics of attention and independent pedagogy. Conclusion, AI ethics should consist an ethics of attention and independent pedagogy. Next slide, please. So that's basically, next slide. Okay. Let me skip over that. So, yeah, now that we have established that AI is an instance of both the integral accidents and the polar inertia, then as the latest vessel of disappearance, then somehow we must foster an ethics of attention and an independent pedagogy for like demarcating the responsible use from irresponsible use. So I've actually intended this research to be an open-ended one. So I'm rather exemplifying how the negative horizon is meant to be executed in terms of ethics. I'm not saying that, again, this is the only integral accident of AI. It's more of a point of contention that that AI independence is not only the integral accident, and that automation is not the only problem caused by polar inertia. There will be future problems that we haven't anticipated it yet. But somehow I'm setting this framework for us to be able to create policies that will cater against the polar inertia and the integral accident of artificial intelligence. That's all. So let me end with this quote from Ian Sabic from And the Secret Fates. Beautiful things take time, but the wait is the best part, because that is what we sacrifice. That is the reason why the polar inertia exists, because we sacrifice waiting, we sacrifice duration to favor speed. This is why able-bodied people are starting to become indistinguishable from disabled persons. Why? Because we're starting to act like them, in the sense that we do not need to like favor speed, and we could do things that normally take time, but then we favor speed and sacrifice the quality of meaningful human interaction. And AI in this case, depending on this case, well, we sacrifice it in favor of speed. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe that's the reason why Filipino time is late, no? Because of the waiting part, no?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
Now, let us proceed to another presentation entitled Exploring Hybrid Security Approaches in Asia's Peace-Building Processes, the roles of state and non-state actors in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Myanmar, to be presented hybrid, online, and face-to-face. On site, we have Professor Yusogi from Waseda University, sir. And online is Assistant Professor Vuzla Nor Sahim Temel from Social Sciences University of Ankara. Let us welcome our speakers with a round of applause, please.
Am I talk like is it fine? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm sorry.
hear you.
Yes, we can hear.
Do you have a slide to share?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I uploaded the slides on the Drive file too. Which one is easier for you? I can share the screen privately. Okay, I think now you can see the slides too.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Today, actually, I'm so happy to accepting this hybrid presentation from our side. Today I will talk about Japan's hybrid peace-building approach in Asia and comparative analysis. This project is supported by the JASO as like a summer research. We did with the Professor Uyasugi in Waseda University in this summer. Unfortunately, I need to back in Turkey 1st of September. For that reason, I need to present this online. I am the assistant professor in the Social Science University of Ankara Asian Studies Department. I am also part of the ASEAN Research Center in the university as well. As in the abstract, we mentioned the Indonesia, but during the research, we focus more on the East Timor, which is a little bit different than the original abstract. I want to explore a distinctive approach to international peace building that challenges conventional Western models, while much attention focusing on the European and American interventions. Japan has quietly developed what we can call a hybrid peace-building approach, which Professor Uyasugi highly worked on it, that operates between Western liberal interventionism and Asian principles of non-interference. The objective of this study to analyze Japan's distinctive hybrid peace-building approach in Asia and evaluate its effectiveness across different conflict contexts, examining both its contributions and limitations to international peace practice. Our key research questions are: first, what characterizes Japan's hybrid peace-building approach, and how does it differ from conventional Western model? Second, how has this approach been implemented across different conflict contexts in Asia? Third, what are the comparative strengths and limitations of Japan's hybrid model? And finally, what lessons can be drawn from broader international peace-building practice? To address these questions, this analysis examines Japan's engagement across three major conflict contexts in Asia: Timor-Leste's post-independent state building, the protested Mindanao conflict in the Philippines, and Myanmar's complex transition from military rule. Based on this comparative analysis, several key arguments emerge. First, Japan has successfully developed a distinctive hybrid approach that bridges Western liberal internationalism and Asian non-interference norms. This positioning as Kakehashi, a bridge, allows Japan to operate in contexts where purely Western or purely Asian approach might face resistance. Second, Japan's approach is fundamentally shaped by constitutional constraints rather than strategic choice alone. Article 9 limitations force innovation in non-military tools, while Japan's dual identity as US ally and Asian nation created both pressures and opportunities for alternative approach. And third, consistent patterns emerge across contexts: respect for sovereignty through request-based assistance, development first logic over political conditionality, and institutional patience through political transitions. Fourth, Japan's approach demonstrates significant comparative advantage, access neutrality, technical expertise, and cultural sensitivity. We will talk more detail, but also notable limitations included elite-centric focus and limited transformative impact. The question is that what is Japanese hybrid peace building maybe? Japanese hybrid peace building represents a middle path between Western liberal peace building characterized by democratization programs and conditionality characterized by democratization, an Asian approach emphasizing non-interference and state sovereignty. Japan positions itself as I mentioned, a bridge between these approaches. Unlike Western donors, who often tie to political reforms, Japan emphasizes request-based assistance that respects recipient government priorities, focusing on economic development as a pathway to stability. Japan's hybrid approach tests on three pillars, actually. First is the development first toolkit. Since Japan cannot deploy military force due to the Article 9 of the Constitution, it developed alternative instruments centered on the ODA, Official Development Assistance, and the JICA-led technical cooperation. Second is the low visibility, process sensitivity, facilitation through mid-space actors, NGOs, private foundations, and civil society organizations. The Nippon Foundation, for example, has played crucial mediating roles difficult for formal diplomacy. Third are targeted grassroots measures, particularly grant assistance for grassroots human security projects. As you know, Japan was advocate of the human security approach, allowing Japanese embassies to support community-level initiatives. Why Japan developed this approach? Japan's hybrid peace-building model emerged from constitutional constraints, domestic factors, and historical evolution. As I mentioned previously, Article 9 constraints means Japan couldn't deploy traditional military instruments. ODA emerged as Japan's primary power tool, projecting influence without violating constitutional limitations. Domestic factors, on the other side, created additional pressures. Japan's alliance with the United States, combined with its Asian identity, requires navigation between Western normative pressures and Asian sovereignty concerns. The domestic focus on economic development rooted in Japan's developmental state experience reinforce belief that economic incentives create better conditions for stability than coercive measures. Evolution spans decades, what began as value creation in the 50s gradually transformed into comprehensive foreign policy instruments became characterized by request-based assistance that respects recipient sovereignty. The first case is the Timor-Leste, 1999 to present. This is the post-conflict state building. Japan's engagement in Timor-Leste represented its most comprehensive post-conflict intervention. When Timor-Leste voted for independence in 1999, triggering massive violence, Japan deployed self-defense force personnel to UN missions, which is building on its earlier experience in Cambodia. Japan's approach emphasized security sector reform through community policing based on its covenant system and respect program focused on economic empowerment for ex-combatants rather than traditional disarmament approach. Japan became one of Timor-Leste's larger donors, providing infrastructure development and human resource training. However, this engagement was primarily state-centric, working through government institutions rather than traditional reconciliation mechanism. Mindanao case demonstrates Japan's sustained engagement in subnational conflicts. In here, Japan's role evolved as a long-term facilitator, providing support to both governments and MILF sites while participating in monitoring through development experts rather than military observers. In here, key programs included Jaybird, launched in 2006, providing infrastructure and livelihood support to conflict-affected community. CCDP embedded Japan's advisors within emerging Bangladesh institutions, and COP seminar facilitating track 1.5 dialogue from 2006 to 2014. In here, unique features included mid-space diplomacy operating between formal negotiation and grassroots needs, and adaptive engagement enabled Japan to facilitate the crucial maritime meeting, as you know, between President Aquino and MILF Chairman Murad in 2011, the first direct dialogue since 1997. The last case study is the Myanmar. It represents Japan's most controversial engagement because leveraging deep historical ties through a non-confrontational approach. Japan's role in here pioneered informal mediation through the Nippon Foundation, and Sasakawa Yohei, which is also part of the Sasakawa Foundation, appointed in 2012 as Japan's special representative, the first such appointment for supporting peace in another country. In here, key strategies use economic incentives rather than sanctions, with Japan's canceling Myanmar's step and providing bridge loans. Japan supported the ceasefire process by offering development assistance to ethnic armed organizations, signing the nationwide ceasefire agreement. After the 2021 coup, Japan's approach diverged from Western sanctions, maintaining limited dialogue while arguing isolation to push Myanmar further to China's orbit. In here, I prepare a comprehensive card to compare analysis. In here, you can see that all these three cases, Japan's approach varied significantly by context. For example, from high visibility state building in Timor-Leste to low profile authoritarian engagement in Myanmar. If I come to the common patterns, on the other hand, several patterns appear across all cases. Japan consistently respects sovereignty through request-based assistance rather than imposing external priorities. Development first logic appears in all cases, with Japan believing economic incentives are more effective than political conditionality. Multilateral engagement combines state institution support with grassroots programming. Cultural adaptation is evident in Japan's sensitivity to political culture and use of appropriate terminology. Finally, institutional patience allows Japan to maintain presence through political tensions. But on the other hand, Japan has structural limitations. The hybrid approach faces significant limitations, actually. The first one is the elite-centric focus, because its privilege established power holders over grassroots voices, And also Japan's narrow definition of peace building emphasizes stability over transformation, which is avoiding politically sensitive issues like transitional justice. Risk of elite capture is substantial when benefits flow through existing power structures. Limited leverage for political change may reduce incentives for meaningful reform. When it comes to Japan's peace building strengths and improvement areas, Japan's comparative advantage includes access and neutrality, allowing engagement with multiple stakeholders, respected technical expertise, cultural sensitivity, enabling sustainable relationships, and institutional patience, providing continuity. On the other hand, areas for improvement include strengthening inclusive participation mechanism, better conflict sensitivity integration, recalibrating the balance between neutrality and human rights advocacy, and expanded local ownership beyond elite partnership. Especially the balance between neutrality and human rights advocacy was highly criticized after the coup in Myanmar. When it comes to conclusion, Japan's hybrid peace-building approach represents a significant non-Western contribution to international conflict resolution. By positioning itself between Western interventionism and Asian non-interference, Japan has created space for engagement where traditional approaches face resistance. However, sustainability depends on addressing limitations around inclusivity and political transformation. The challenge is evolving beyond elite-focused stability toward genuinely participatory peace processes that address structural causes of conflict. Japan's experience offers valuable lessons about alternative models, but the question is not whether Japan's approach is superior to Western alternative, but rather how different approaches can complement each other in addressing contemporary conflicts. The ultimate test will be whether Japan can adapt to meet evolving demands while maintaining the cultural sensitivity and patience that has been greatest strength. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. So, are you going to add, Professor, or we proceed with open forum? Let us invite once again our three speakers for this morning, and we open the floor for questions. Joining us online from Turkey, right? Turkey. Yes, anyone who would like to start the questions? Yeah.
Good morning. It's not really more of a question, but it's more of a comment regarding AI use in education. So yesterday I was also presenting in my presentation about the risks involved in using AI in learning, such as the overdependence on AI. However, on the other side, you have another group of people who downright reject the use of AI, who completely ban them in their classrooms, and ironically, they are the ones who use them themselves. But then, that's another thing. This phenomenon reminds me of how we should approach AI moving forward. Because me personally, I believe AI is not going anywhere. It's here to stay. Therefore, the dual reality of what is happening, the dual extremes of what is happening, I'm reminded of Aristotle's doctrine of the mean, where we try to navigate ourselves through the currents of two extremes. Which is why, in my personal experience, in my classes, I actually encourage students to use AI. Why do I do so? Yes, shipwrecks are caused, or are actually causes caused by the invention of ships. But moving forward as well, looking at it on the bigger picture, these shipwrecks happen, and these shipwrecks can also help us to further develop navigation, which is why I asked them to do so. Sort of sue me, but I sort of use my classes as experimentations on how to better approach AI in the teaching learning process. What I found out so far is that uh, students use AI really for as much coursework as they can. Even where courseworks where they simply just express their opinions or their reflections. Again, these are reflections, these are personal insights. They don't really need to use AI for this one. And I even ask them, you can simply just write down 1 to 2 sentences, just for it to be simple enough for them not to use AI. And lo and behold, I still see students hiding their phones and doing tap 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 on their phones. And yeah, so one realization is that, especially for undergrad students and lower, it's really hard to keep the sessions synchronous and online. It's hard to monitor them, which leads me to my first consideration if ever we're going to have an AI use policy, is that there should always still be human intervention,
Yes.
especially on the side of the mature person. You mentioned earlier that there should be a guide still when we're using AI, and I believe as teachers, as instructors, professors, we should be the ones who are morally mature enough to guide students into responsible use of AI. For example, what I do in my classes is that I ask them to I actually even give them the prompt. Use this prompt in AI, whatever AI you're using. Just some factual information, and then in class we're going to talk about this. We're going to establish which one of these are factual, which one of these are correct, which ones we need to correct, and then proceed with the lesson. So again, human intervention should still be present. Uh, Also, it should be guided by a well-developed virtues, because students need to know when to use AI and when not to use AI. Again, the virtue of prudence. Uh, Sorry, that's prudence. I ask them that whenever you're going to use AI, declare it. Right? This information was used. This particular AI was used. Grammarly was used to correct some of the grammatical concerns, and then you supplement it with other sources, with other information. And I believe a lot of journals are do not now have an AI use policy where they ask you to declare what AI you used, and some even goes as far as to ask you to indicate what prompts did you use in your use of AI. I believe there's about a journal. I forgot what journal what journal that is. So I think it's again, it's not much of a question, more of a comment to further the discussion on AI in learning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. Perhaps Mark Justin, a very brief response.
I personally agree with everything you said earlier. Yeah, that's why when we keep these standpoints from polar inertia and the integral accidents, somehow it's kind of a perspective wherein, okay, in light of the polar inertia, in light of the integral accidents, what would constitute this dependence and what would constitute a irresponsible use from AI. So yeah, again, it's also more of an open-ended thing, since we need to like further also ask when is a certain use of AI dependent and when is a certain use is no longer dependent, because even that is also hard to demarcate. So yes.
Yes, thank you. Who else? I have a question to Mark
Yes.
Justin. Can AI be a tool for peace building? How will it be a tool for peace building, Mark?
Sige, Mark. Because you listen to my talk.
Do you have the mic?
The microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's the microphone?
Huwag na, Jill.
Battery po yata.
Yun lang, you can speak.
Sige. Anyway, don't mind. It's just
AI and peace building.
I'm not really serious, but just
I kind of like see
interesting.
that as more of like, I'm not sure as to how AI can be used to
Mhm.
somehow build peace in the first place, since I'm kind of formulating the opinion that it's slowly becoming detrimental to man rather. So I think as of now I'm willing to revise my position, but however I think I'm of the position that AI could not be used for that purpose,
No.
for building peace in the first place. I don't know how.
How about in the context of virile you?
Well, well, in that case, he always views things from a negative horizon. So he's kind of more of a pessimistic philosopher in terms of viewing speed. So yeah, I think if we will place peace building in the lens of Virilio, if he was still alive, I personally think that he will basically advocate for like simply the kind of meaningful human interaction that favors the concept of journey, because when we favor speed, I guess peace building is something that will take time as well. So if we place it in with Virilio's context, then it's something that we cannot rush rather.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank
Can
you.
Can I also
Yeah.
answer in
Sure,
a way?
of course.
I think Dr. Jinay has something to say.
Okay. How can AI be a tool for peace building? Now, I want you to imagine this. This is very basic. If your heart is heavy and there's no one to talk with, you can talk with AI or to AI. And it's already unfolding the negative energy that you are bringing within yourself. So that's something that's positive about AI.
Yeah.
Remember, Dr. Mabakiao told us yesterday that your relationship with the AI, the way you treat AI, reflects the kind of person you are.
Yes.
Okay? So, our relationship with the AI, because Mark, you've told us that there is this lacking of attention.
Yes.
In fact, I'm always hurt with the way my son is responding me sometimes. Because
Yeah.
if I will say to my son that, can I call you? And then my son would say that, I'm sorry, Mom, because I'm busy. And then I realize that my son is doing something using the AI. You see that? So that's the insufficiency of the human attention that all of us are actually seeking. Because, like for example, Juchiru, my friend, if I'm going to send a message to Juchiru and he's not replying to me, so I can conclude that he has no attention to me. So, of course, that's a factual relationship, but we're talking here of AI as a mechanical other.
Yeah.
So you see that? So it's true that it's really quite complicated, and we need patience
Yes.
as a virtue.
Yes. Another thing I would like to add. I also have a concern regarding AI, because I've also consulted AI back then for love advices, but then we have love advices because relationships are sometimes complicated, and I got kind of like curious what would AI say in this kind of situation and what would the friend say. And sometimes AI gives like red flag advices. Say for example, I told AI that okay, I'm dating someone. I'm really interested in this person, but I'm not tied to this person, but somehow a part of me still wants to explore. So, but then again, I wanted to prove that I really like this person. So I kind of asked AI, is it ethical for me to like put myself out there while I'm saying to this person that I love this person, then I'm also putting out myself out there that okay, I'm open to loving someone else. So somehow I kind of perceived AI's answer as a red flag in that kind of sense. So it's more of like I felt like we need to add as well the practice of discernment. Like there's AI does not know love in the sense that humanity knows love. And what it knows is basically the relationships between words. It does not know exactly number two in like number two as two entities, two things and whatsoever. It's more of like it it argues based on how it perceives relationships between words. So yeah, we also have to kind of like discern that. I mean it's also like again virtue ethics. We have to find the means between the two extremes. So yeah.
At saka aminin natin, Mark, that sometimes ayaw
Yeah.
natin ng mga sagot ng mga friends natin.
Yes, exactly.
Kaya pumupunta tayo sa AI, di ba?
Yes.
Because AI is more sympathetic than our friends.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Professor Timel is still with us. Maybe she has some things to say on AI or about peace building, Professor. Or perhaps you have questions you'd like to address to Professor Timel. She's still with us online.
May I ask a question?
Professor, are you still there?
Hello?
Yes?
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, it's
All right, Professor. I just wanted to know, because I'm also advocating for peace building, right?
Yes.
Particularly the local peace building paradigm, wherein we need to capacitate the individuals who are involved in the building of peace. In particular, being sensitive to their traditional practices in building peace. So my question is that, which is the highlighted dimension in hybrid peace building paradigm, especially that it's just like, in the Philippines, we have this halo-halo. All right? Because I understand, based on my readings, that the hybrid framework of post-conflict peace building is actually a combination of the existing frameworks of peace building. So, which is highlighted there.
Actually, the issue is that there was also the hierarchy between the local communities in the conflict-prone societies. Time to time, the outsider actors like the Japan or others want to help or establish some relations with the grassroots communities, but the issue is that it's time to time it's not impossible to cover all of them. The vulnerability between the groups or comparatively the groups also so visible, especially in the conflict-prone societies. Like, as I mentioned, Japan in the hybrid peace building has 3 pillars, and one of the pillars is that establishing the relations with the grassroots communities, especially giving some aids via the embassies, in Japanese embassies in the located countries. But as I can say that it may not always possible to cover all the communities effectively and equally. For example, in your presentation you mentioned about the women, and it is easy to say that most of the time women get aid less than the men in the conflict-prone societies. As I can say, yes, it is one of the pillars, but when you are looking for the efficiency, it could be better. For that reason, I also pointed as one of the limitations for the Japanese approach. I hope it is the answer of your question. Maybe Professor Uesugi want to add more?
He's no longer around.
Sorry, Wesley has a lecture, so he's gone.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, I hope this is the answer of your question.
Yeah, I have, may I ask also a question? I will ask the question to Professor Tem. What is your view on the approach of introducing peace studies and peace education, like for example, through academic institutions, wherein encouraging academic administrators to introduce and emphasize peace education into their curriculums by way of integrating peace studies concepts on various basic and general education subjects or courses. Do you find it somehow an effective solution to promote peace-building narratives?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I think it is so important in a couple of the points. First, academics most of the time has more tendency to isolate themselves from the daily politics or more radical thinking. They are more critical. For that reason, it is so important them to introduce the curriculum since they are rising. For example, most of the countries, international relations bachelors, continue their career in the foreign affairs ministries, and they somehow be part of the peace negotiations in the long run. This is the one side. Like we are also rising to future mediators or the people who are working in the peace building, peacemaking, mediation processes, etc. On the other hand, I think that a lot of the developing countries who has some interest to extend their agenda as like a mediator or the peace builders, introduce academics to policymakers as well, to find more solid ground, to introduce more comprehensive and logical and effective peace-building analysis. For that reason, I'm thinking that in these two sides, it's important. Of course, publishing, writing in academically is so important. We can connect like our audiences in international, but on the other side, rising students in the classrooms so important because they will be the future mediators. This is the my response. I think like in Turkey, for example, I can give examples. The international relations departments introduced peace-related courses in the bachelor programs, and I was graduated from Waseda University from my PhD. I know that the Japanese institutes also introduced peace-related courses in their bachelor years, even from the freshman years to their curriculum.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anyone? Anyone else would like to ask? We have a question from Miss Isabella.
My question is for Ma'am. Hi, Doc Manipo po. Just a point of clarification lang po, Ma'am. You have mentioned that healing of suffering can be done through narrative hospitality, and it is in the mutual exchange of memories. And it is also mentioned a while ago in the moments of suffering that there is a point where we are there's incapacity to share memories because they are suffering. So with this, I am curious as to how we can reconcile this, as to how we can sort of, have a trigger point to conduct narrative hospitality when the proponents in the narrative themselves cannot share their story because they are suffering. So, what is the, start or trigger point po?
So, yes. One manifestation, based on the lecture that I gave a while ago, that one of the manifestation that the person is suffering because that person could no longer tell her story. So, for Paul Ricoeur, that is an example of a break or a rift in the sense that you could no longer recall your past. In the healing of memories, it's important that there is recollection. Because you cannot heal the narratives without recognizing your past. Because, in the first place, narrative is simply retelling of the story of the past. And there is the intertwining of time. The present, the past, the present, and the future. In the sense that you have a wounded past. And in order for you, in a way, to heal your past is to open your story. And that opening of the story is actually done in the present. Right. So it's actually making the past story vivid again. And in telling the story of your past, you're actually giving hope to your future. So that is how these three elements of time are actually intertwining each other. But remember that you cannot just tell your story alone, because that's monologue. There must be an other that's actually listening to your story. Because listening to the story of the other one who is actually in suffering is empathy towards the other. Of course, it needs time to open yourself to the other because of the issue of trust. Kumbaga, sino ka ba? Bakit ko ba isasabi ang story ko sa'yo? Kaya I agree with you, right? That it really takes time to tell your story. And unveiling your wounds is actually a journey. Just like the thing that I've told you that the stereotypes about women, these were long before. Right? So napakatagal na ito that until this time, it continues to exist. So it might be because there's no healing of the narrative. So there's a need to have this dialogue, in particular between the victim and the perpetrator. And lastly, if you cannot tell your story because you are suffering, let others tell your story. And that's the thing that I'm doing. I'm actually telling the story of the woman. Women are actually victims of violence. In fact, these women, some of them are dead. But I am continuing the narrative of violence because of the hope that someday these narratives will be healed. So I think that's how important the concept of recourse other to the healing of narratives as an important part of the peace building process. Okay?
Thank you so much, ma'am, for continuing the narrative po.
Dapat lang.
Yes.
There's
Ah,
the
yeah,
part,
yes.
there's the part in the,
One at a time, so make sure, okay?
Yeah, sure.
yes, sir. There's one part in the work of Paul Ricoeur about the testimony, ma'am. So which stands as the formulation of class consciousness can also be regarded by means of others telling their stories to you in such a way that the one who cannot open will become open. And that's why the testimonies of others are also needed in the part of narrative identity. That's just a comment.
Yeah, I think we need to proceed to the handing of certificates. No?
It's already
Yeah.
time.
So,
It's already time, but
certificate
that's a very beautiful
of
comment. No?
appreciation.
Because that's something to do with the relationship between the identity and the authority.
Yes, very interesting discussion, guys. But we need to end our session with the handing of certificate of appreciation is awarded to our speakers this morning. First, Dr. Godiva E. Rivera with her paper Violence Against Women Overseas Filipino Workers, Hope and Healing in Post-Conflict Peace Building. The same certificate is also awarded to Mark Justin P. Santos for the presentation entitled Against the Shipwreck of Thought and the Speed of Knowing, Learning and Artificial Intelligence, Aurelius Technological Philosophy, Independent Pedagogy and Ethics of Attention. And last, but of course not the least, no? First, the same certificate is awarded to Assistant Professor Vusla Nor Sahin and to Professor Yuzi Yu Sogi. So, and maybe we will send a scanned copy of your certificate to Turkey.
It could be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's a photo, perhaps somebody will hold the certificate and take the photo for Professor Temel. No? And in behalf, Professor Jutsuro is holding the certificate. Okay, another shot. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, time is up.
Thank you very much, Professor Timel, for your time with us this morning. We are here in Tokyo, Japan. It's 1 p.m. and we are still about to take our lunch. Thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah, of course, me too. The future of philosophy.